This is a podcast from Duncan Cartlidge Online, the online resource for all construction professionals that's available 24/7. Now, please don't forget to subscribe at the place you usually get your podcasts, so as not to miss a thing in this second series, as well, of course, as visiting our YouTube channel. Hello again, and welcome to another podcast from Duncan Cartlidge Online. As usual, Barney, my red Labrador, is here to offer his advice and to keep an eye on things. And by the way, Barney and I would really appreciate if you could write a review. If you're new to Duncan Cartlidge Online podcasts, welcome. Please don't forget to subscribe, as well as catching up with previous episodes. If you are already a subscriber, a really big thank you for your support, and spread the word. First, the bad news. This is the final podcast in Series 2, before Barney and I go off on our summer holidays, and it will be, at times, a somewhat light-hearted retrospective covering the events of Season 2's podcasts. I have subtitled this edition, Big Ange Bites Your Legs. And now, the good news. We'll be back in late August, early September for our third season. I know that not everybody who subscribes or downloads these podcasts is a member of the RICS, but since the turn of the year, the adventures of Mothman, or as Inspector Clouseau would say, Mythmen, aka Justin Sullivan, the step-aside RICS president, just keeps on giving. The RICS's own practice note gives mandatory guidance to members when acting as expert witness as follows, and I paraphrase. Members' expert assessments must be personally undertaken and prepared, and not an edited version of another's work. The length of time it's taken to investigate this, and I quote, very complicated issue, is treating RICS members with contempt. Don't be surprised if this complicated issue rumbles on till the end of Mythmen's term as president. There must be an end to the RICS marking its own homework. We've now had 12 months of a Labour government, so it seems like a good time to take stock. The overriding promise of the new government was to deliver 1.5 new homes in the lifetime of the Parliament. Most people in the know raised an eyebrow when they heard this off-the-cuff target from the new government, although 12 months later, despite warnings and planning permissions as a 13-year low, the same target is still on the table. When the target is missed, it's clear who will get the blame, and it won't be Big Ange, as apparently it's all the house builders' fault for not meeting their targets. According to Big Ange, they, that's the house builders, promise to build houses and they're not doing it. Roll up your sleeves is the cry and get on with it, otherwise we'll slap you with a penalty. All of which seems to guarantee to get the construction industry on your side. The announcement followed the publication of two major government initiatives requiring house builders to set delivery timeframes prior to get planning permission, and to produce annual reports against these timeframes. If house builders fall behind without reasonable justification, and there's no definition of what that is, Ange will penalise the culprits with a new delay homes penalty at a yet unspecified level. At least one outraged SME builders has posted a YouTube video expressing his outrage at the proposal. Certainly, off-site modular construction is not going to come to the rescue, as more specialist firms disappear into administration by the week. I saw an article in Building Magazine this week giving companies until the end of this week to express interest in delivering some health scheme issues with PPP. Well, good luck getting that past the medics trade unions, particularly the BMA. They thought they had killed off PPP for good. But of course the elephant in the room is skills shortages. Despite Labour's promise to create a thriving, professional and skilled workforce, Gen Z is quite obviously not impressed with the prospect of cold, muddy building sites, finding, according to a recent CIOB survey, that the lack of breakout spaces and temperature control on building sites, for example, too stressful. On a positive note, it was good to hear that a scheme to make it mandatory for domestic builders to be licensed came a step closer. For many, domestic construction work is the public face of construction, and currently there are too many rogue builders giving the industry a poor reputation. The proposed scheme, which has been kicking around since 2021, will be funded by the industry with initial and renewal checks built into the system. And while on the question of dodgy builders, the question was asked, is UK construction broken? Certainly, following on from Grenfell, there have been questions asked about the competency and the ethics of construction. Several schemes have been introduced to encourage both contractors and construction professionals to prove their ability to build and procure buildings. But most, if not all of the schemes are voluntary, and I can't see industry queuing up to prove their competence. Can you? And, speaking of Grenfell, the establishment of the Building Safety Regulator to scrutinise planning proposals for higher risk buildings, although welcome, is not exactly a great success. Unfortunately, the BSR neglected to tool up for its new role, resulting in massive delays in planning approvals of anything up to 12 months. In an attempt to improve the situation, 2 heads of the BSR resigned and the process was moved from the Health and Safety Executive to the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, although the latest feedback is even this doesn't appear to be working, with the aspiration to get approval time down to 5 weeks. RICS members were further incensed when Justin Young, another Justin, the Chief Executive, and Martin Samworth, the Chairman, gave the Times newspaper a bizarre interview on their view of the property industry from their fully expenses paid air-conditioned executive suite in the south of France while attending MIPIM. Listen to this. According to Samworth, the world is now full of, and I quote, sustainability people, it's full of data scientists, it's full of prop tech. Apparently, that's short for, and I'm sure you knew this, property technology specialists. It's full of a whole bunch of people that the RICS should accommodate as members. It gets worse. In the article, the chairman goes on to say the property industry is dominated by middle-class ex-public school boys and is famous for its lack of diversity. If you can't afford to go to university, that shouldn't stop you from becoming a chartered surveyor. You just need to do it a different way. The words chip and shoulder come to mind. Last words on the RICS, still no sign of the review of entry pathways into RICS membership. Official word on the outcome is far too early in the process. A process that has been ongoing for 12 months. A few years ago, I was supervising a final year dissertation for a part-time student. The chosen topic was corruption in construction. When his boss got to learn of the student topic, the student was strongly advised to change it, as it was too sensitive in inverted commas. Makes you think, as it's been another shameful phase for fraud and corruption in construction. The Serious Fraud Office launched a multi-million-pound international bribery investigation centred on individuals in infrastructure provider Blue 3, suspected of paying over £3 million of bribes to former associates of Mace Group. In another recent case, 6 employees at energy company E.ON were jailed for up to 46 months for their criminal conspiracy linked to a major housing development in East Devon, again involving bribes of cash, high-end hotels and luxury cars to ensure the companies that made legitimate and fair bids lost out on work. Unbelievably, the excuse given by E.ON's head of projects was he believed corrupt practice was widespread in the construction industry and the method by which business was done. Nice try. It may well be that corruption is widespread, but it's no good. But he could be right, as today 7 of the UK's biggest house builders have offered the Competition and Markets Authority £100 million to drop charges that they were caught sharing competitively sensitive information on projects. I'm not quite sure if this is ethical. And finally, on the question of corruption, 3 former site managers at Keltbray, the demolition contractor, were found guilty of taking bribes totalling more than £600,000 over a 6-year period, and they also were banged up. Proceeds from the scam were found to be funding a large-scale drug supply operation in the southeast of England. To quote Homer Simpson, "It just gets worse and worse." AI and digital construction seems to be all over the place like a rash, and has been heralded, as so many other developments in the construction sector in the past, as the silver bullet to propel construction into a brave new place. I assume one of the reasons is trying to convince Gen Z that there's more to construction than cold, dirty porta cabins, and that construction sites all have dedicated air-conditioned breakout areas with PlayStation consoles. Sorry, that's a bit naughty. I must confess I'm not a fan of AI in general. It's a bit like driverless cars. What is the point? It's obvious when AI has been used to compose an article, email or presentation. As to digital construction, what impact has that made in your day-to-day working practices? I'd be interested to know. Getting paid, which let's face it is fairly basic, is still a big problem for many, including the question of release of retention. Clients and main contractors are essentially given carte blanche as to how they hold and use retention monies. Consequently, it is not uncommon for clients and contractors to use retention money to support cash flow or profit margins. A recent report found that around 71% of contractors surveyed had experienced delays in receiving retention monies, and 44% of contractors surveyed had experienced retentions not being paid at all due to upstream insolvency. In addition, many contractors and subcontractors agreed to write the retention off as a goodwill gesture or to encourage future workload. These issues have resulted in an industry-led campaign to address the underlying problems caused by retention and to propose alternative mechanisms including project bank accounts, performance bonds, retention bonds, etc. And finally, I noted recently that one consultant has introduced a hard hat to accommodate individual hairstyles, including long or braided hair and baldness. What a brilliant idea. Inclusivity at work. That's all for this episode. I hope that you found this interesting. Thank you for listening to the end, and indeed to Season 2. Barney and I admire your stamina. This has been a podcast from Duncan Cartlidge Online. Barney and I would really appreciate it if you were to spread the word, subscribe, or if you have time, write a review. So, Barney has already packed his swimmers, and this is the final podcast of Season 2, but we'll be back with a bright new shiny Season 3 in late August or early September. And until then, of course, while you're lying on the beach, you can catch up with Seasons 1 and 2. Take care and enjoy the summer.